Good afternoon, everyone. This is Alistair Lawson from the Maine Youth Action Network, and with me I have
Jerome Bennett. Afternoon, everybody.
Awesome. And thank you all so much for your patience this morning. We, as you found out, had a few tech issues, but we're now got one of the best microphones in the world, so hopefully you'll be able to hear us and follow us along for this webinar on strategies and approaches to promoting youth voice. The next 45 minutes, we're hoping that you will get some skills around building your strategic partnerships, as well as some tools to use on the ground as far as retaining and sustaining your youth groups. We've been hearing a lot of feedback coming back around the youth policy boards and the youth taking action groups. So we hope some of this will be information that you can go out and use with young people. We also just want to put out there that we're going to be covering some theory that goes into the work, goes into the curriculum that you're using. And so we hope that you'll also get some strategies to use the information that we're giving you as you talk to adults, as you talk to other partners, to get their buy-in for the work that the young people are doing. So please, use what we have. We'll have handouts at the end as well to send out to your to use in those conversations about your work. So Jerome, do you have anything else to add?
I couldn't have said it better myself. I'm looking to get into this.
Fantastic. Okay, so we'll just go over some objectives from today. We hope that you'll learn some practices and processes to use while engaging and integrating youth voice into the work that you're doing. We hope that you'll be able to build some strategies to enhance your community and your presence within those communities as well. Hopefully you'll pick up some tips from us in this webinar. Also identifying ways to utilize equity in the system reform process. We'll cover some of that in the webinar today. And finally, is to understand how the program contributes to the prevention of substance use, social justice, and adolescent mental health challenges. Okay, Jerome, I'm going to pass over to you to begin us on how does reform work?
What is this reform stuff?
What is it?
That is a good question. And first off, the definition of reform is making changes to something in order to improve it, and that sounds like you're fighting against the current, So I really prefer to use enhance, because the point of this webinar today is to introduce everyone to equity and inclusive practices, because it takes a village, and there's a role for everybody. And that's the significance of our program. It's really tailored to enhance the state of Maine's prevention efforts around substance use, social justice, and adolescent mental health. And traditionally, there are stigmas that come with substance use, social justice, and adolescent mental health. And the result of those stigmas are young people that we work with, that we engage, feeling marginalized. And so again, we're really going to drill down on equity strategies, inclusive practices, relationship building, so that we can positively build relationships with young people that's been marginalized, and create an atmosphere where positive youth development exists, and make our communities better.
Great. So exciting stuff then. Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm so excited for this next slide.
This is my mantra. Those closest to the problems are closest to the solutions. That's so important when you think about our work. And reform must involve those most affected by the issues, so that we don't further marginalize groups. And if we're not engaging those that have been most affected, it's very easy to divide our community, because now you have solutions that only work for a certain portion of our population.
Yeah, and also just like to add something that me and Jerome were talking about recently was sort of the idea of, when we're asking young people to show up in our groups and stepping into sort of like their growth zone, getting away from being in their comfort zone. And I think when we try to identify young people, sort of recruit young people who, are being marginalized or are being affected by some of the issues that we're trying to work with them, the students that are most at risk. It actually also, is a good reminder for us to step into our own growth zones and sort of, it's very easy for us to remain in our comfort zone. And with that sometimes can translate into who we're recruiting or who are the young people that we're bringing in. So throughout this webinar and throughout the work that we're all doing, we encourage you to constantly be sort of like modeling the behavior that we're asking young people to be vulnerable in stepping into sort of places and doing team building activities, to doing the reform work and the policy work and stepping in front of, a DCC board to make recommendations. So especially as we think about those closest to the problems, are the closest to the solutions, it also might require us to sort of evaluate sort of what are our strategies to reach out to the people that really are closest to the solutions as well as closest to the problem.
Well said. Well said. So, Alistair, what are we looking at? What are we working with here?
Well, one of the big parts of our program is that we are a youth program. You're all youth programs, and a lot of the work that we see, a lot of research that's been done, has used youth in a way that maybe has been more adult-driven than youth-driven, and so a lot of programs, when we think about. Also, this picture, by the way, is fantastic.
Thank you.
Certainly an adult-driven car there. The adult-driven programming is based on the rationale that adults know how to best help youth. And we know that youth are their own experts. We know that we need to value them and partner with them on a level playing field. So if programs are putting sort of adult voice first and using youth, tokenizing youth, we know that we're not leading a youth-led program. So we really pride ourselves here, and we're really excited for the work that you're doing, in that we're really encouraging youth to lead these projects, these campaigns, these policy boards. Programs that are created for youth, that are designed by adults, are not always effective or efficient. So as you're doing your research projects, as we're building this network of youth voice, we have to be coming back to what the youth really care about, and build their skills gradually with a lot of support to engage them in really effective youth programming. I think, programs that treat young people as passive participants or only superficially involve them, like as it says there, less likely to produce beneficial outcomes for their constituents. We really need to be finding space for adults to really see the important perspectives that young people have. And so we really and you've all begun sort of like your work with the youth taking action groups and policy boards, in that we're really putting that youth first, but also being that support, and not just putting sort of youth out there and expecting great things to happen without that adult support. Jerome, anything else to add?
Awesome. I mean, when working with young people or anyone with lived experience, there's a lot of value that come from adversity, and we really need to acknowledge that and create a space where we can foster young people to be the content experts that they really are, and that takes a developmental process. And we're gonna say more about that.
So getting adult professional buy-in, as we mentioned in the beginning of the webinar, we've been getting some feedback about potential pushback, or actual pushback, not just potential.
I'm too busy. I don't have time to hear about this. That's too much work. We're doing our own agenda. Those are a lot of feedbacks that systems that are already engaged in various work might give to programs that are trying to engage them to enhance those systems or programs.
Exactly. And so we put our heads together and said, well, you know what, let's go over some things that can help you all sort of get that initial adult buy-in, especially, with the youth taking action groups. We're asking you to sort of be that support for already formed groups. So there are a lot of dynamics at play that we hope that some of these things will help you as you are promoting the programs here. So we'll just, as you can see, the list that we've come up with is quite extensive. Jerome, I would love for you to talk a little bit here. One that really sticks out for me is modeling equity strategies. Some of this terminology, I think most people will understand, but if you were to be explaining, modeling equity strategies to somebody who doesn't know too much about what that means, how would you?
Definitely. Modeling equity strategies is huge. And The reason that it's huge is that like I mentioned before, traditionally people that are navigating substance use, people that are navigating adolescent mental health, they view life a certain way. They may have different needs. They may have certain perspectives and outlooks on life that differ from the norms, and I say that in quotations, that our society are ran by, you know. And because of that difference, we tend to push them to the fringes of society, and we don't really acknowledge or accept their voice. We think that the decisions we make are better for them. And so equity strategies is an intentional way to bring back those young people that society has pushed out on the fringes and engage them in a reasonable way where they have purpose. And the thing is if you've been through it, you have skills and abilities to help other people that have been through it. And so to get institutional buy-in, these equity strategies would save money. It'll heighten engagement. It'll better your relationships with communities, etc. So equity strategies is just being intentional about representing the voice of those that are most affected and doing that in a positive way. And that's why later on we're really going to dive down into social emotional learning and relationships and networking, because we're in the people business now, especially when you have people that are dealing with varying levels of trauma and the more adversity that you face, because when you're marginalized and pushed to the fringes of society, you're in a vulnerable situation, and you're in a situation that can create adversity. And there's a lot of ACEs research, adverse childhood experiences, that support what we see. When the more adverse childhood experiences you have, the more susceptible you are to health disparities, aggressive behaviors, substance use, the things that we tend to have punitive responses for. And so part of this whole reform work, a big part, is a lot of people are behavior focused. They look at the behavior, and then there's consequences of the behavior, but we really need to rethink how we hold people accountable. And we can still hold people accountable in ways where they can continue to grow, develop, and we can move forward as a community, as one.
Absolutely. And I think sort of as we also move up, we're going to be talking a little bit about, positive youth development, what that is. It's a philosophy and it's an approach, right? And so we want folks to be really focusing, and there's a lot of research, especially with youth work, that has been, focused on sort of like singular sector, sort of the deficits, or negative behaviors versus like trying to like build the assets and the strengths of young people, which is what we're trying to do. And, like just piggybacking quickly again off Jerome as well, just to get, what else can you do sort of like immediately to sort of build the adult professional buy-in? And I put a couple of things here about sort of like hosting community events and inviting everyone that, in that community, having youth be involved in that. The more people that see you, meet you, build that relationships, the more trust you're going to get, the more excitement that you might see. And again, so much of the initial sort of reach out and sustaining programs is through that trust and those relationships.
And when you do that, you have to be conscientious about framing, frame it and name it. So establish a clear purpose, and you want to shape the narrative, so take everybody through that growth process to provide that understanding.
Absolutely.
And so one of the other topics or other reasons for adult buy-in is improved employment outcomes. There's a lot of skill building and critical thinking skills and nonverbal skills that young people and adults learn as we get these groups going and as we form relationships.
Yeah, that's something, I don't know, if I'm a teacher, parent, or someone, and I'm learning about like my young person getting like more skills to build their skills in the employment world and college, like this is part of sort of like what really will, get adults to buy into the program. We put down there like working with local businesses to provide youth with internships and jobs. Developing those partnerships with those local businesses can also be an incentive for those young people. Like ultimately, like young people, ideally we would love to be able to stipend all of these young people in a while. But if you can connect youth to internships and jobs and sort of like give them the skills to use within these internships and jobs, then we're doing them and the community a real service. Okay, so moving on to youth-driven infrastructure. Jerome, just wanted to quickly just say a few words about this because we touched a little bit already so far.
Yeah, I mean, organizations need to be developed to need to be committed to embedding youth voice and young people into their infrastructure. And it's more than just having youth at the table. And one reason why the Maine Youth Action Network has like youth policy boards and youth taking action groups and young adult youth adult partnerships is that those all play a significant role in creating that culture shift, that paradigm shift that we need. There's a lot of prep work and a lot of prior engagement that you have to do before you even get youth at that table, because they need to be at those tables as partners. And if they're not at those tables as partners, if those engagements aren't necessarily mutual, we're not really optimizing their room for growth. And that's what this is all about. It's about increasing protective factors, creating a safe space so young people can develop and succeed in life.
Wait, so you're telling me you can't just throw a young person into a board meeting and call it good?
Won't look pretty.
Won't look pretty? Well, look, how about we need to get the youth through that door in the first place, right? So
how do we get them there?
Oh man, there's so many ways and so many barriers as well, right?
Definitely won't call it a youth policy board.
So we, I think, and a lot of you are already doing this. And again, I think we were going to mention this at the end, but I would also love to continue to share resources about things that have been successful. I know a few of you have been meeting sort of over the phone, and we would really encourage that to be sort of a collaborative sort of like sharing leadership around sort of these strategies that we're offering here. Again, we would, we really understand that most of you, you're doing this already, but here are some quick ideas that will sort of reinforce the work, and you'll also see that in the curriculum. I think there's a big, and you've all probably heard me talk about the connections one-on-one, and the building those relationships is absolutely key for us to be able to continue to recruit and also to retain and sustain your youth groups. Like young people will be drawn to people that they feel connected to, feel that they can share, they're engaged, and they're getting something out of. So the connections and one-on-one can be anywhere, anytime. We go back to those community events. It can be just sort of like hanging out with some kids and doing playing some basketball, at some point, right? It can be
exactly
as well as doing the programming. I know obviously there's time to consider, but there is a real importance of sort of like looking at sort of like the structured time that we have for the curriculum, but also like some downtime just to build those relationships. It will help in the long run.
So it's important to create space for that. It's not all about business when it comes to young people, and that connection piece is important. And we really drill down on some peer support skills that you can use to continue to build effective one-on-one relationships. And connecting one-on-one can be as easy as knowing one thing about a young person outside of your traditional relationship with that young person. Find out what they like, have conversations about their passions, their hobbies, show interest, because that connection needs to happen. If you're not in a safe place, and I think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you're not, it starts with safety. Personal development starts with safety. And if they're not in a safe place, you're going to hinder that room for development.
Mm-hmm.
With that being said, it's really important to value their lived experience. And valuing their lived experience is acknowledging that there are significant skills and growth and capabilities that come with navigating various lived experience, and at the end of the day, they're able to share that with other people to help them navigate life and support them as needed.
Yeah. And again, all of this, like fits under positive youth development, right? I think when we're thinking about those connections, we're really looking for what are the assets that young people have? What are their strengths? We often go to like, are we getting them mastering academic skills? But really we want to be also like valuing sort of how we're helping young people find their spark. What are they interested in? Is Jerome interested in running? Great, we'll connect him with the coach, and then there's going to be one caring adult, and part of the positive youth development model is the caring relationships with adults. So it's ways of finding out like what are young people passionate about, and then help them build that confidence, which is exactly what we're doing in these groups, in the policy groups and youth taking action groups. And so yeah, just moving on quickly as well, I just wanted to go over a couple more of these. If there are any questions, by the way, as we go through this, please, we're going to send out an evaluation after this, but we'll also send out the slides, but please make sure to give us a call or some questions about some of these things. I think one for me as well is like you'll see in our curriculum a lot is about enhancing group identity. So what does that mean? What does that look like? So it's huge. But I think sort of once young people feel that there is an identity of the group, they feel that they're accepted into that group, they feel that they have ownership of that group with their peers, and then as that group is doing work, doing research projects, eventually they're going to be bringing in more of their community, more of their peers, and so they're enhancing that identity, which will allow your group to be noticed and to be seen and to be heard, and as that happens, the momentum builds, and you'll find yourself, I think, getting more and more interest and youth buy-in, essentially.
So you might want to initiate your groups with a campaign, with a fun project that's inclusive of the community. And if you're a school-based program or a community-based program, then depending on your topic, that can provide extra opportunities to engage different populations that are affected by substance use, adolescent mental health and social justice issues in a different way, and that really kicks off your social emotional learning process right from the bat, builds that team identity, and is fun for young people to participate in. Fun is always good. This is youth work.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, again, youth engagement doesn't just happen overnight. I think I keep coming back to this. I must have read it somewhere or something the other day that youth engagement doesn't happen overnight, as if it did.
Some brainwashing.
Some brainwashing. But I think that's why we put so much emphasis on like these research projects, right? Because to develop young people, to get that buy-in, to get real, make sure that they're getting real input is a gradual process. We need to support them a lot during the beginning, and one way of doing that is by doing these research projects straight off the bat. I think young people, they're busy, they have lots going on, and so we can talk about the theory or sort of like the why we're doing this, but until they're actually doing that and getting these early successes, even if that is like kindness, like it is a small little activity, like for instance the creating your map or mission statement for a group, and recording that and seeing that online on the Mind website, mind.org. Like there are many little successes that you can build in to your programming to get that initial youth buy-in, and then through that research you'll be engaging youth, you're giving them the skills to go out into their communities and start to see the fruitions of their work. So I think like all of those things combined are really helpful, and why we've put so much emphasis on the research part, especially within the policy boards, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And before we move on, I have to drill this home with the connecting one-on-one that allows you to find out how you're going to get the youth buy-in. So, do they feel like they're not included in a community and they want to build natural supports? Do they want to develop a certain skill set? You know, they can do, their social media opportunities, there's, you know, marketing, there's networking opportunities. Do they want to simply be a part of a group where they can be themselves because a group like this doesn't exist, you know? So really drill down on connecting one-on-one, finding out how your group can add value to their life.
Mhm. Yeah, and I would encourage you as we move forward, is where do you see this in the curriculum that we've given you? You know, where are you seeing that as you're planning out your sessions? Where can you can do some of this this skill building? Where can you and why would you do team building or an icebreaker, you know, to start building that group identity? So as you know, and that would be sort of something that I would love to just add as well as we're moving through this, is sort of after the webinar, hopefully going back and seeing where some of these tools can fit that you can use.
Mm-hmm. And that may open up doors to have youth co-facilitators and to engage youth through the entire planning process, which is strongly encouraged because they're able to communicate better with their peer network.
So quickly, the social emotional learning, which is a big part of obviously of our programming, and it's a vital piece of why we're doing this work, and like the skills that are involved in and what we're trying to build for young people as they develop. So the 5 core tenets here for social emotional learning, which I imagine all of you have seen, are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision making. So, you know, like social awareness is sort of being able for young people to recognize one's own, you know, your own emotions and others, understand how other people view different situations, or being aware of your own cultural identity and understanding the views about the differences of culture, you know. And to do this where, you know, like when you're working with your groups, is developing that positive climate. It's building those relationships, those like working through conflict. You know, another reason why we put in so many team building activities, they're purposely there so that they challenge young people to come to solutions and, you know, like push sort of like each other's buttons a little bit, so that you can like work through them through debriefing, through, you know, other ways of engagement, so that they're building these sort of like softer skills, which are essential that we know as they develop and going forward. And also just, you know, the research shows that using social emotional learning within the work that we do improves the community that they're in. It gets them more engaged in their community. Anything to add, Jerome?
No, that was good.
Okay, great. So this is a thing that I actually just found the other day. It's from the Future of Jobs and Forum, and another just a really interesting slide here about the top 10 skills. That this was a research project that was done with some of the top CEOs, HR directors from businesses across the United States of America, and it was really interesting to me to see that in 2020, what are the skills that these businesses think that the people coming into the workforce will need. And as I'm looking at these 1 to 10, so many of these are the softer skills, the skills that they're needed, that are specifically social and emotional skills that we're trying to and you're trying to implement into your programming to support young people to do. You know, I put down here sort of consider a classroom in which the group group work focuses not only on mastering academic material, but also how well students collaborate and communicate with each other, because they are the skills that, you know, you look at number 1, complex problem solving skills. These are skills that not necessarily are taught in the classroom, and that will be developed inside your program walls, but also outside your program walls. You know, all of the curriculum written in that youth policy board curriculum is allowing students to be able to develop their critical thinking and empathy skills. These are the skills that, you know, that research is now saying that this is what young people who are coming into the workforce need. And I thought that was just a really interesting sort of example of why this work is so important, and why social and emotional learning is so important to be implementing. This is I understand, a very complex and probably quite small view on the screen to read. I will send this out, but this also sort of, again, I put look familiar because hopefully some of these qualities, character qualities, competencies that we're trying to, offer young people is familiar to you as you're working in your groups. It's a great tool, I think, just to sort of like look at how do I teach social emotional learning? Like what does that even look like? And so it really breaks down some of the ways in which you can come back to and think about how you're setting up and how you're working with young people. For instance, sort of like curiosity. What are the questions you're asking in your debriefs? What are the questions that they're asking people out doing their research projects? What are they going home to research, to come back to the group for a further discussion? Like it's encouraging their curiosity is another engagement tool, but also a really valuable learning thing for them. And so in the middle here, we've got how to teach all of these skills as well. And I think it's just a really good, helpful guide. So we'll send this slide out. And particularly, I think sort of the providing appropriate challenges is also a really important one as you're forming your groups, especially if potentially the young people don't know each other that well and they haven't formed, they haven't built those relationships with each other yet. It's really important to not go and do a really complex team challenge, for instance, that's going to cause a lot of conflict and is generally really difficult, like the human knot. I don't know if anyone's done the human knot, which involves a lot of sort of like touching and overwhelming, and like we don't also
cried.
You cried. We don't want Jerome to be crying, but also like we want to make sure you're really aware of sort of like what are the appropriate challenges, what is my group ready for, and will this be helpful, or is this something that I just think I have to get through? Because we want to make sure that you're thinking always about what are the appropriate challenges, where am my group at, and what do I need to sort of move them forward in a way that they can continue to learn.
Mm-hmm. And that itself is social emotional learning. You're being vigilant and you're being aware, and you have to meet your young people where they're at. Mm-hmm. And so Mayan groups, the Maine Youth Action Network, Youth Taking Action groups, youth policy boards, youth adult partnerships, like we reiterate, we created a lot of space to go through that social emotional learning process. On top of that, you always need to capitalize on the opportunity for social emotional learning. So where else does this fit in? Field trips. So, because part of social awareness is social. So you need to get out there and you need to build networks. And like we said before, reform is enhanced. And so, these young people's, and it's so, and it couldn't be more important to build natural supports, especially if you've been marginalized. It increases protective factors, it reduces risk. It really starts to, you start to gain your identity and really start to find your safe space in the community. So when you're planning a field trip, even if it's to meet like a local stakeholder or somebody in a prevention or mental health field, then how can I turn that field trip experience into a space where social emotional learning could take place? So before we jump on the bus, there needs to be some type of self-awareness, some type of discussions around self-management. And so prep work really before the field trip even happens. And then when they're there, what skills are we using? And we're going to go into this later on in a webinar to build healthy relationships with multiple stakeholders, with other peer groups, with other people in your community, so that we can really have a comprehensive idea of what's happening in our state, what the issues are, and who's in our community.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and so
I'm just gonna keep
talking right now.
You're on a roll.
And so the start of social emotional learning is self-awareness. And so when I think about self-awareness, like I think about implicit bias. And there's an increasing amount of research that's coming out about implicit bias. And when we're talking about implicit bias, we're really talking about the brain. And, implicit bias refers to the attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, actions, and decisions in an unconscious manner. And so we might have certain conscious beliefs, and we may truly believe that we have those beliefs. That's the definition of beliefs. However, our behavior there are studies that show that our behavior is reflective of a lot of our unconscious bias. And there's contributing factors to that. There's our background, our personal experiences, our culture, and the media has a lot to do with it. So the fact of the matter is that traditionally there's been a lot of bias and negative stigmas around adolescent mental health in general, substance use, and people that get involved in the juvenile justice system and other institutions that can change, and there needs to be a paradigm shift. And so.
Can I just cut in there as well? Because it just made me think a little bit about the skills to be able to identify your own bias. Like we all have them. And sort of like as we work with young people through this curriculum, through our programming and seeing and trying to like give them those skills to be able to start to have empathy for other people, understand sort of like why they think the way that they do, and sort of doing the how do you know it, why do you know it sort of activity. It also makes me just like, as a good reminder for myself, is how am I showing up with young people, because those interactions might be if I'm having a debrief and I keep going to that same kid and not recognizing that there are a couple of other folks that are disengaging, or I'm having an opinion on them because they are disengaging or they're not behaving the way that I think appropriate. So constantly been checking yourself as a facilitator of what are my triggers, what are my biases, especially when we're thinking about implicit bias, being aware of them, especially is key as we work with our groups.
And there's no shame around it, because this is we're talking about a brain thing, and so it's okay to own it. And you have to you have the mindfulness to navigate that situation in a positive manner. How do implicit bias get instilled? I got this diagram from the Kirwan Institute when they were talking about in a study where they were talking about the effects of implicit bias on the education system. And when I talk about stigma around social justice, adolescent mental health, and substance use, we're exposed in our lifetimes to all these negative symbolic attitudes, and one of the ways that we learn is classical conditioning. So these negative symbolic attitudes get drilled in. We see it on TV. We see kids that get caught in the juvenile justice system. They may be on probation, and they're dealing with substance use, and the end result is being probation violations. So they might end up going deeper into the system. You might see kids that in residential placements that are getting triggered from peer-to-peer conflict, and may be a little bit more reactive because they have a certain view on life based on their past experiences, and next thing you know, and this is a main stat from a year ago, you have about 40% of the people getting incarcerated in Long Creek coming directly from residential placements. So there's all of these negative connotations. Schools, zero tolerance policies. Kids are getting kicked out for navigating life, and recovery doesn't happen overnight. I was in the zone.
I know you're in the zone. Yeah, I could listen to you all day. I really could. Like this slide in particular, thinking about implicit bias and thinking about who's listening, thinking about the folks that are working, who are going out, and also with these young. what sort of advice as they're working with their young people with regarding to sort of like this information? How can we make this?
I would say, understand your own bias, and you spoke to it in terms of like group management, and since it takes a community and there's a role for everyone, if you were to introduce your groups to other people that have different levels of lived experience, have that conversation prior about they may have around what they're about to be exposed to, just so they can be conscientious and really go into this engagement without judgments, without stereotypes, right? Because if I'm thinking negatively about you, if I'm judging your lifestyle, your way of life, your experiences, it hinders room for relationships, and this is the relationship business because there is value in lived experience. So we got to come free of judgments,
and especially as we asking people to be making recommendations on substance prevention, on adolescent mental health, like these things come with so much stigma, and we need to be supporting young people in being able to identify what are the consequences of these policies, these recommendations we're making, and that's sort of like why we wanted to talk a little bit about that, and where you'll see so much of our intention behind the programming that we've that you're doing, is to be helping students to identify all of these things. Not only is it a social emotional learning aspect, but it's also a skill so that when they're in front of adults, the adults can again hear from their expertise, because they're going to maybe come up against some bias coming back at them. So we want to make sure we're preparing them as well as possible. And this is a great, I think, sort of reminder of theory into exactly how we can support young people to navigate that, and adults, obviously.
Yes.
Okay, so moving along to the strategic partnerships, that's what we're in. We're in this business. What skills can I use to build healthy relationships? I think I'm actually going to move along from that just because of time, Jerome.
Empathy. Starts with empathy.
Starts with empathy.
But and then there's skill, and then we're going to dive into skills to achieve empathy, because it's not always easy to be empathetic if you're going to be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
And so and some of those skills can be accounted for if we look at intentional peer support, and it's studies show that personal relationships can be used to counter biases, because if I know you, if I have a connection with you, I have more of a deeper understanding of why you do what you do and your beliefs, and intentional peer support is a way to build those positive relationships through connection, maintaining mutual relationships, and understanding and someone else's worldview, and seeking to understand someone's worldview. And you can do that through appreciative inquiry, and this is really just like appreciative inquiry is the art of asking questions, and this is a strength-based way to engage a young person or any individual in a way that where everybody continues to be safe, and it comes from a curious place, and you're really drilling down through a strength-based lens on and sometimes like having difficult conversations, but like I said, there's value that can come from those difficult conversations, and this is a way of framing your questions and going about your approach in a way that's non-triggering with young people.
Also makes me sort of think a little bit about those moments when you're asking a group, what do you think about something?
And you hear crickets.
And you hear crickets, yeah. Or you hear some answer that makes you go, ooh.
Yeah, yes,
who
the
like
heart
hands
attacks.
up? Like you can't see, but I'm putting my hands up. Jerome's putting his hands up right now. But again, thinking about like, what are the questions? What are the essential questions you can have that doesn't shut youth down from sharing what they really see? Like, how do you really like ask the right questions that are gonna allow them in, and you're validating what they have to say, and also build their capacity if it is something that makes you go, or if there is complete crickets, is like evaluating how are you're asking those questions. Open-ended questions, sure, but I think building in some sort of like questions that allow them to become curious and hold on to that is also really, really important.
Yeah. And when you have those moments, that's an opportunity for you to engage in nonviolent communication. Like, well, at the end of the day, we're a partnership is mutual. And so when we have those moments, we can be honest about our observations, the feeling that having that observation gives us, and we can make a demand. So, we can tell them whether it's a partner, whether it's a young person, like we can tell them what we need to maintain our safe space, because that's important in a mutual relationship. And you'll see that the respect level really goes up once you navigate these types of waters.
Oh, validation.
Validation. I love that picture.
I love that
Give
picture.
it to me.
Did you
Give
put
it
that,
to me.
Did you put that picture up? I mean, and make the slide, because I want to validate you and sort of like those bullet points right there.
I felt the connection right there. And so, like when we were talking about appreciative inquiry, validating people's lived experience, like acknowledging that they're content experts, and finding ways to foster that. Validation is important in connecting.
And it reminds me of just quickly a story of working with a group, speaking to their advisor, and they were going to do a presentation, and we'd worked, I've seen them do this presentation a couple of times, and felt that some of the comments or back from the audience were sort of unnecessary. Like, do we really need to sort of like give them so much like validation after their performance? And the advisor was like, that's one of the biggest things for them, is when they were hearing sort of peer recognition, adult recognition just for their work, it validates them, it validates their experience so much. And it was just a really good reminder of sometimes, like when you have sort of like a kudos going around with a bunch of students, how important that is to hear from each other and validate their work, because it feels good. And like we're also in the world of feelings. And
a lot of times a young person would feel like they hear I can't, or they may think I can't, or you did this wrong, and that's marginalizing. That can create a distance, and there's when we're talking about humans, and we're talking about the human emotion, there's always complex emotions involved, and validating can help someone say, hey, like I can, and I did this well, and they can continue to find out and explore other things that they do well. Pause. I'm just going to just allow it to marinate a little bit. And that leads us to positive youth development,
which you all are doing. And it's as I said, it's a philosophy, it's an approach to work. There is so much research that is now out there, particularly recommend looking into the National Research Council of Positive Youth Development. It's a really good model, and they do incredible amounts of good work there, with lots of different individual studies about how to implement positive youth development into their programming. I think these are sort of like some of the key skills with which you get by doing positive youth development work. Just because of time, I think right now when we're thinking about recruiting and sustaining youth groups and going back to that, remember that
no
is the
so important
sense of belonging, right? We know that adolescence, an important part of adolescence, and most youth, they're so highly focused on their peers and building their own identity. There is a desire for and that can be really positive, and what we hope that everyone is creating within their groups, but it also can be negative, right? And so we need to be if kids are not feeling like a sense of membership or belonging to their group, they're not going to come and show up. So it's that you come for the pizza, you get them in, they come for the food, and then what do they feel safe? It comes again coming back to like how are we creating that safe space, both physically and psychologically as well,
for every single person in your group, including yourself. because the growth needs to be mutual. That's when you form the strongest relationships.
Again, I'm going to send this out. This is just a quick slide on the continuum model for understanding youth participation. Goes back to, I don't remember the first couple of slides with sort of adult infrastructure as far as like your programming. We hope that we're building youth programs that are designed and run by youth. And this is a sort of a really interesting model, I think, for you to just see where you're at. There's no right or wrong answer, but we're hoping that the way in which youth are engaging in our programming, we're heading towards more of the youth power side over here, which is youth initiated and sort of building in those shared decisions with adults rather than sort of just being used to be a kid on a board.
And it's a process, you know.
It is a process. Exactly.
Do you know?
Did you know? So the strategies for retaining, I think for me, there is so much expertise out here that I know that I'm talking to. And again, if you have information, please send that over to share with us. Call up, folks close to you, as well as us. Like, we want to be networking together to make sure that we're being consistent in the way in which we're retaining our, these young people, and also what are the things that are working for people right now. I think a lot of these things we've talked about, I think they do fit under sort of that social and that emotional learning piece. I think, identifying incentives for youth participation, like what are they going to get out of it? What's the point? Kids, everyone's busy. If I don't see sort of the point of doing something, it's not relevant to me, then why am I going to show up? So figuring out, and that comes back again to building those one-on-one relationships, finding out, speaking to not only the young people but the teachers and the parents, making those connectionships and partnerships.
Asset mapping, know what resources are in your community. You might be able to go on a free fishing trip, and that may be key into building your group identity. It's really endless, and the sky's the limit. So build relationships with different parts of your community so that you can utilize it after you may want to go in that direction.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to remember as you're going through working with these youth groups, that the curriculum that we've designed is there to guide you. It's there as a sort of a backbone. But, if you're finding opportunities to go on these fishing trips or going on, a field trip or something, like that is all part of it. That is how we're sort of going to build that group identity, how you're going to find, like we mentioned it here, finding time to hang out before and after, because we know people learn in different ways. Some people don't learn as well in really structured ways in which you're leading your groups. And so maybe there are ways in other settings where you can sort of be engaging young people in your group. I think, like another thing that is modeling second chances. We all make mistakes. Our sound didn't work for the webinar, but our boss is so great.
Alistair's
just offered us some second chances. But
here we are.
Is that right? And it helps them. Also, like, I think we need to be doing a lot of why we, again, I keep coming back to these team building activities, but every single activity that we've got in that curriculum, young people might not get it. They might not understand it straight away. They might fail. And like, we need to be learning with them about how to deal with that and how to deal that with positive, reactions and positive work rather than sort of, giving them the impression that if they fail, then they're a failure, because we know sort of the negative effects, the research shows it, of that. So I think that's a really important way of retaining and creating that safe space again. And, just below here is like, we talk about strategic partnerships. Travel and transportation is hard, and we get it and we understand it. I think if that is becoming an issue, then are there other partnerships to access vehicles that you can make? Jerome, you've done a bunch of this. You were telling me a story about
in college you befriended someone with a car. Every group of people had someone who owned a car in it, and so maybe that's a partnership with the school. So you might need to talk to the superintendent of school, see if you can utilize the buses. You might want to, are there any local charter buses that are, or taxi companies that are involved in goodwill campaigns, because they might be down for the cause and they may help you figure out your navigational issues. or your transportation issues, which are navigational issues. Use your network. Like if you're experiencing a transportation barrier, like don't keep it a secret. Like, you know, go to your DCC meeting and say, hey, like we got a group, like these are our barriers, you know, and that's social, you know, that falls under social emotional, you know, they're being aware of your barriers. And at the end of the day, everyone has common goals in mind. So we really need to rely on our network for to move things forward.
And so you all know as well, like we're here to support that too. You know, like we have network in our name.
Oh, are we?
Yeah, we do. Like we have network.
That's
in our name.
right.
We know some folks. So again,
A little
you know,
bit.
you know,
Use
can't
us.
underestimate. Please use us and to help you advocate. We know like the stresses that folks are under and the time constraints, and we know the ask that we've asked. And so like please do use us if you need, you know, any help in sort of whether it's transportation or programming, whatever. But
and before we move on, something that stands out also is find time to hang out before and after your groups. And the reason that's on the list is because sometimes you just don't know what's going on in someone's life, and they could be having a hard time. And again, when we talk about community network, like using your community network, that can look a lot of different ways. You may have to be equipped, especially when we're employing equity strategies and we're dealing with people with various degrees of lived experience. You may have to have immediate connections to resources so that they can remain safe and still be a part of your group. You know, so you might need to help with housing, or refer to housing and support them through that process, because there's a lot of we talk about implicit bias. There's a lot of barriers and stigmas around certain groups of people. So really be prepared to have a referral network so that we can continue to build that safe environment for the young people we work with.
And the slide that you're looking at, sustaining your groups, I think we've done a pretty good job of actually also going through some of these during this webinar. I think one of the pieces I just wanted to have folks just thinking about is, you know, as you're providing those spaces, as you're bringing young people into your organization, is just thinking about like the you know, the staff training. How are other adults in your organization interacting with youth as they're coming through the door? You know, it's incredibly important that when we talk about safe space and we talk about sort of, you know, young people being psychologically and physically safe within sort of like the youth friendly areas that they're coming to, is that, you know, all staff are working with these young people in a positive way, you know.
And so with that being said, there might be room to introduce a youth adult partnership training, you know, because there's a world outside these groups, and a lot of times your young people are trying to operate and navigate these worlds. So finding out how you can utilize resources like our youth adult partnership training is key to creating that sense of connectedness outside of the group, and to follow that young person around so that they can continue to develop.
Yeah, and you know, again, sort of as we talked a lot about this recruitment and sustaining your groups, I think another thing which I'm really excited to see happening within the youth taking action groups, as you're supporting already formed groups and the policy boards that are forming, is also like accessing them to opportunities. You know, we talk about strategic partnerships, but through the work that you're doing, the research projects that are going to be happening, they're going to be building connections with other folks out in the community, so that they're going to, you know, people out in the community are going to be seeing your young people doing this work. And so like having young people actively engage in the community rather than you having to bring the community to them is going to be really empowering on both sides of things. And also will begin to maybe shift some of the I'm blanking on the word I'm looking for, sort of shift the narrative around some of the recommendations that they're after, you know. So often we go back to that first picture of sort of like adult driven infrastructure and adults knowing best. Our hope with all of these policy boards that are going to be going is that we're having them do these research projects, you're having them do these research projects, so that adults can really see the power and value of youth doing prevention work, doing this, making these really important community changes. Yeah, anything to add, I guess, before we finish up here, Jerome?
No, that was
That was
nothing at the moment.
nothing. Great, yeah.
So please, we encourage you to use the shared Google Drive that the district youth coordinators have access to. We added a few resources. We'll be adding resources as we all move along down this road of community building, down this yellow brick road of community building. So attached or in a drive you could find now and Embracing Equity. That was by Annie Casey Foundation. They have 7 steps to advance and embed race, equity, and inclusion within your organization. And let me just premise this with saying the material is race-based, but an equity strategy is an equity strategy is an equity strategy. It's great and powerful that we take race into consideration, as well as other things that give us what am I trying to say? It's important that we take race into consideration, as well as other things, but these strategies can be used through any type of lens. So definitely refer on this as you're managing your groups. We also have racial equity impact assessment. You can use this assessment to guide to do effective research with your groups. On the assessment, there are a number of questions to assist in exploring adverse consequences of proposed actions on groups. You can use this assessment more generally while you're exploring topics and be a little bit more specific once you narrow in on a specific policy that you want to enhance. But definitely use that assessment more generally, even as you're getting your research, your general research done, because it's an amazing thought process that it takes you through so that we can be mindful, and that's a part of social emotional learning. And then there's a Kirwan Institute, an article on implicit racial bias. That's where we got that nice implicit bias roadmap. And the name of that article is Implications for Education and Other Critical Opportunity Domains.
Great. All right. Well, I mean, there's also sort of, please, we'll also send this out as well to all of your emails to give us some feedback about this webinar. This is the first webinar we're doing. We're hoping to get a new platform soon that was going to enable us to do more interactive conversations as well as like some information. Very aware that we gave a lot of information. We hope that some of this is just reinforcing sort of the skills that you already have. And also, feel free to use the slides, request the slides from us if you're going in, doing presentations, building those partnerships with folks to talk about this work. Please feel free to do that. But, give us our feedback on this webinar if it was helpful, what can improve. And also, like, as you now sort of like, we're doing it, we're doing the work. We're here to offer that technical assistance for you, within the youth adult partnerships, folks that you're working with, and youth as well. So like, get on to the surveymonkey.com link here, which you can click on when I send you out the slides, but also feel free to give us a call, talk through that curriculum, talk through sort of where your groups are at. That's what we're here for. We want to support the good work that you're doing, and we're excited to see you be implementing all of these principles to youth work. And again, thank you so much for everything you're doing out there. We do genuinely get really excited when we
very much appreciate it.
Our updates. So thank you all, and yeah. All
right, over and out.
Over and out. We need to get like an outro theme or something, don't you think? Sort of like, oh, this is crazy. And then what could be our outro? We'll figure that one out next time. A
little too country, maybe.
I don't know.
We'll figure it out. All right. Until next time.
See ya.